Hello, this is Hillary Potts, and welcome to this audio. This is the third audio in my series called The Truth About Change. My goal is to provide you with content you can immediately use and become more adept and agile at leading change. I know firsthand how difficult it can be to lead change. There are so many moving parts and people to take into consideration, and not everyone is going to be as enthused as you are to make the necessary changes to achieve the desired result, even if you are doing the right thing. So I hope you enjoyed my first two segments. In the first segment, I talked about the 5 steps to leading change, and we discussed the 5 A's in creating a change leader framework. In the second segment, we went a little bit deeper in one of the A's, and it was about how to gain agreement and alignment with your leadership team. And I shared the 3 steps you can take to work with your team on a current or an upcoming initiative. So if you've missed those, I suggest you go back and take a listen. I have decades of experience in leading and advising businesses as they've implemented change efforts. I have a passion of seeing leaders and organizations achieve their goals and having employees take pride and ownership in their efforts. No matter how good your vision, your strategy, or your process may be, the truth is your solution is led and it's deployed by people. If you don't address your leadership and the actions of others, it will be extremely challenging to achieve your desired results. If you are like most leaders, you have a passion for driving change and achieving results. So figuring out what's needed in your organization and how to drive them to success is important. Let's face it, change is here to stay, and it feels like, I don't know about you, but it feels like it's getting more complicated, and people are getting more wary and resistant to want to jump in and be part of the solution. In my recent book, The Truth About Change, it's a leader's guide to successfully executing change initiatives, and it's meant to help leaders build engagement and commitment for even the most complex, the most gnarly, and super sensitive changes. But it could also be used for both small and large changes. So be sure to pick up a copy on Amazon or at your local bookstore. I also have a ton of resources on my website at www.hapgrp.com that can help you bring your best to leading change. In this audio, we're going to continue the conversation and discuss how the concept of a leader change roadmap can be a very helpful tool for you and your leadership team to lead and navigate strategic change effort. You know, there's a famous quote by Benjamin Franklin. I'm sure you've heard it. If you fail to plan, you plan for failure. I know this is obvious, but I can't tell you how many leaders act without their own leadership plans. I don't know how they're leading change. I get a whole litany of actions others are going to be taking, and then all of a sudden, you wonder where you are on your plan. But a leader change roadmap allows leaders to know where they are and what role they're playing at every point in the change. When I talk about this, many times I'm met with blank stares when I ask, do you have a leadership plan? And of course, people tell me about their strategy and their project plans. But if you as leaders have painstakingly addressed the business issues, you spent hours, weeks, and months on the solution, and you've worked back and forth and discussed the solution and set the direction, then it behooves you to also create the leader change roadmap to help you go from point A to point B. So, maybe you've been fortunate and you have a project management office that helps lead the effort, or maybe you have experience yourself. But these tend to be tasks on a spreadsheet. What I'm talking about is, what is your leadership strategy? What are you going to do and say that's going to help others do and say the new activities to get to the result? So it's all well and good to have a business plan and a project plan. However, leaders need their own plans. And why is that? Well, first, there's this gap between strategy, plan, and execution, and it's a big gap. 70% of change initiatives fail to meet their desired intended results. And a project plan lays out the actions to deploy for initiative, but it doesn't lay out the behaviors that individuals, groups, or leaders need to do to work in the new way. Second, typically change initiatives, while they may be specific for a strategy, And it's not the only thing people are working on. Usually one change initiative leads into a multitude of different changes in addition to the day-to-day business. So just because it's in the project plan, just because you have executive meetings on a regular basis, doesn't mean that people are actually carrying out the tasks. And even a carrot and a stick approach doesn't always work and put the fear in people. What we really want to do is have people want to change versus feeling like they have to comply with the change. And finally, we discussed this in the last segment about agreement and alignment, and it's not a one-time exercise. Leaders need to be continually checking in and seeing where their organization is headed. Are we all headed in the same direction? Are there issues that are getting in the way? And there's a ton of effort that goes into implementing a change, and we want to make sure that effort of people is heading in the right direction so we maximize the results. So what I have found in my own work leading initiatives, as well as advising and consulting to many, many leaders, is that the creation of a leader change roadmap is a really helpful strategic thinking tool that helps guide leaders' actions. It helps leaders think about kind of their own playbook and how to engage in one or more initiatives, in multiple changes, in how everything comes together and works in concert, and helps them figure out when to dip into a project and when to step away. A leader change roadmap brings together the business plan, the case for change, which we talked about in the second audio segment, and the project plan into a leader roadmap specifically aimed at mapping out the leader's actions. So let me give you an example. When I was working with this leadership team, they were centralizing some core processes, and each of the business areas had their own way of approaching the business. The company wanted to find a central way so that they could get rid of the redundancies and the duplication of efforts, at the same time keeping local entrepreneurial autonomy. So this took some discussion with the leaders to gain agreement and alignment, and at the same time, it meant changing leadership actions so that the people in the organization did things differently. So they started to implement the changes and realized that they were all still moving in different directions. But when they sat down and mapped out a leader change roadmap, they were able to see where the sticking points were going to be, so that their chaotic, heroic efforts could then be met with more concerted effort to lead the changes. So we spent time mapping out in each area what needed to be done, what were the desired actions. At first, honestly, the leaders were really skeptical. They didn't feel that they really needed their own roadmap. They felt that they knew how to lead change. But when you're talking about a group of a dozen plus leaders, you want everyone to be engaged in the same way, moving in the same direction, so you can start to see the change pretty quickly. So let me give you some of the 4 key elements to consider as you start to create your own leader change roadmap. And I do give some more information in my book. But first and foremost, you want to understand the strategic impact. And this means agreeing on the case for change and getting that started. It means identifying those new actions and how difficult those actions will occur on their own or not, and what a leader needs to do in addition to training. So let me, as an aside, training is a fabulous tool, but what I find is we send our people to training and they come back in the organization, but then there's no reinforcement by the leadership for those new actions they learned in the training. We just expect people have gone to training and poof, they're going to know how to do things. Well, work gets in the way. So understanding what you can do when there are new skills, there are new ways of doing things, how do you reinforce that? Second, what leaders also need to understand is the implication that multiple initiatives have on the organization. It can get very confusing when you are on initiative overload. So what I'm suggesting is to prioritize and to sequence what really needs to get accomplished. So to do this, you need to map out what you're asking of the organization. If you have 4 different projects happening at the same time, map out over a timeline what you're asking people to do and sort, prioritize, and sequence the activities. What's critical? Where are they going to be the bottlenecks? Where does there need to be some leadership activity to help move people from the old way of working to the new way of working? Again, remember, we're trying to yield better results. So our actions matter. It helps to also define and review what's actually new and different in an initiative and identify those critical behaviors you're asking of people. So in addition to the training, our work is to reinforce new skills, new behaviors to form habits on the job. So our job is to accelerate that learning curve, and a leader can play a very key role in shaping new behaviors. And then finally, a leader change roadmap takes into consideration new behaviors and helps a leader think about what they're doing, why they're doing it, and how they're doing it. Which leads to another comment. Most new initiatives add new actions, but rarely, and I mean rarely, when I ask leadership teams, what are you going to ask people to stop doing? Well, most of the time, the room kind of gets a little bit silent. So a leader change roadmap helps leaders think through what do we want people to start doing, but what do we need people to stop doing so that they have the time to start doing new behaviors. So a final aspect of creating a change leader roadmap is for leaders to establish their role in leading the change. And here are a few change leader behaviors that I find no matter the organization, where I am in the world, this handful of behaviors become really helpful. One is be engaged and be visible. And this means clearing time in your calendar to be available. Walk the halls, ask questions, check in with people, listen. And I mean really listen to what you're hearing. You might not like what you're hearing, but listen to what's happening so that you can help mitigate some of these concerns. 2, I've mentioned this on my other audio. Communicate with the audience in mind. This means less telling and a lot more engaging people in dialogue and discussion. Find ways to listen to the problems, listen to the objections, and work with a team to help find a workable solution. And finally, act as a coach. Provide that ample feedback to help people work in the new way. You know, we're conditioned as humans to want to do more of something that feels rewarding, that feels fun, that we see the positive outcomes. And we tend to honestly shy away from things that can hurt us, where people criticize our efforts, and where, frankly, we might fail. So ask yourself, are you a leader that is respected because you reinforce people and inspire people, or are you a leader that is feared? And if people are afraid of you, you may be getting compliant behavior and you may be seeing the results, but they'll be really hard to sustain those results over time. So I'm not going to tell you that this is an easy concept to create a leader change roadmap. It's not. It's a very valuable tool. I find many of my clients, once they get the hang of it, really use this with all their major change efforts. And it allows them to be more thoughtful and more effective. They're more engaged at the right times in the right way. I find when leaders are able to map out and understand how to engage in a change effort, they can utilize their time, they can stay on top of the situation, and they solve issues a lot earlier, and they're able to positively shape the changes in their organization. When leaders don't have a clear role and they've not mapped out their leader roadmap, they lack the clarity and the focus, and it becomes, well, quite exhausting exercise to drive to a result. It takes those heroic efforts that aren't necessary. Their actions are chaotic, they tend to be confusing, and they're rushed. They feel like they're saving the day, but quite frankly, it's not helping. So my suggestion is for you and your leadership team to pick a current initiative or an upcoming initiative and create a leader change roadmap, map out your change playbook for leading the change, and use that discussion to set guiding principles on how you're going to approach the projects, map out a 30, 60, 90-day plan of how you'll lead so you can bring clarity and focus to the efforts. As Peter Marshall, the famous producer of the Happy Days series and many other shows, he's known for saying, let us not be content to wait and see what will happen, but give us the determination to make the right things happen. Thank you for listening. For more information on how to successfully lead change, be sure to check out my website at www.hapgrp.com, as well as pick up a copy of my book, The Truth About Change. It's on Amazon. And until next time we speak, this is Hillary Potts. Thank you for listening and continuing to bring your best leadership. Bye for now. This audio was recorded by Tony Jones and produced by Raskin Resource Productions.